The outer edge of the galaxy was usually quiet. Merchant ships crossed the long trade lanes in slow, bright lines, and border stations watched cold stars without fear, and deep in the black between systems, old warning beacons drifted like forgotten bones from older wars. No one expected anything to happen there anymore because the last great conflict had ended many generations ago, and the rich worlds of the Galactic Union believed peace had finally become permanent. Captain Rel Thorin did not trust peace. He had served the Union for 30 years, and he knew that peace often meant comfort, and comfort made leaders blind. That morning he stood on the command deck of the patrol cruiser Ashara and looked through the forward glass at a field of distant stars. His first officer was speaking to him, but he was only half listening because something in the dark ahead felt wrong. Then the sensor officer went silent. Every head on the bridge turned toward her station, sir. She said in a thin voice, "We have contacts." "How many?" Rel asked. The officer swallowed and checked again. "More than she first believed, thousands, maybe more. The system is filling with signatures. But they were not there a moment ago." The bridge became very still. "Show me." A projection rose above the center table and the room filled with red marks. Too many, too close, too sudden. They spread in organized lines across the outer region of the sector. Like a wall made of steel and shadow, no known fleet could move that size without being seen long before arrival. But these ships had appeared as if space itself had opened and let them through. "Any signal?" Rel asked. "None, sir. Not even engine noise on the deep scan that made no sense. Every ship left some trace, but these shapes floated in the dark like silent knives." The Union outpost at Vera Station hailed them first, because that was procedure. The station was small but well armed, and it controlled the nearest jump gate. Rel listened as the recorded transmission came through the speakers. "Unknown fleet, this is Varus. Border station, identify yourselves and state your purpose." There was no answer. The station repeated the message, then again and again. After the fourth call, a single pulse came back across all bands. Not words, not codes, just one deep sound, like metal striking metal somewhere inside a giant tomb. Then Vera Station disappeared from the tactical screen. No explosion, no debris, no distress call. One heartbeat, it was there, and the next it was gone. The Ashara bridge erupted with voices. Rel raised a hand for silence. "Lock all drives, keep distance, send full alert to Central Command, and record everything before anyone could move." The main screen changed on its own. Letters formed slowly in the center, bright white against black. "We have returned, nothing else." Followed for several seconds, and the silence on the bridge grew heavy enough to crush breath. Then the second line appeared. "We have come to collect their debt." The message vanished. No signature, no language marker, no source pattern, but every translator on the ship understood it, as if the words had been spoken in each crew member's own tongue. "Who are they?" "The first officer," whispered Rel. Already feared, he knew. In the heart of the Union capital, the Grand Council chamber filled faster than it had in a century. Ambassadors, military leaders, traders, and advisors rushed in under a storm of angry voices across the room. Ancient races with silver eyes and crystal skin sat beside scaled lords from red suns and tall machine-aided nobles from fortress worlds. Every one of them looked shaken. High Chancellor Esfand stood at the center platform and ordered silence. "The outer sectors report a fleet of unknown design," he said. 3 stations have gone dark, and 22 patrol ships no longer answer calls." A message was received by all of them, the same message. The chamber screens lit up with the words, "We have returned. We have come to collect their debt." A low wave of unease crossed the hall. Then an old voice rose from the far side of the chamber. Ambassador Thalika the Narun was older than most governments. His face was pale and his long fingers trembled around his cane. "I know those words," he said. Everyone turned toward him. Thalik took a slow breath and looked at the message as if it had climbed out of his worst memory. "Many centuries ago," he said, "before the Union took its current form, there was a young race from a hard blue world near the spiral arm. They were not advanced, and they were not rich, but they were stubborn and impossible to break. Their homes suffered plagues, storms, famine, and war, yet they kept building. They reached the stars late and desperate. Humanity, some in the chamber, frowned because the name meant almost nothing to them children. learned of humans as a minor footnote from early expansion days, a species that borrowed ships, fought pirate wars, and later vanished beyond charted space. Thalek continued, when the Karos Dominion attacked the frontier worlds, humans asked for aid, they offered service and labor in return for protection. They signed debt treaties with many powers. Mine among them, we gave them ships, old weapons, medicine, and access to routes, but the price was cruel. What price? Asked the Chancellor. Silence then, another council member answered, because Thala could not force service prison contracts, dangerous mining front lines, sacrifice zones, places where no established race wished to send its own people. A third added, they were called adaptable, so leaders used them everywhere they could suffer and survive. We saved them. Someone protested. No, Thalek said quietly, we used them, the room changed after that. What had seemed like a military threat now felt like a ghost returning with perfect memory. Records were opened at once, and ugly truths came spilling out. Many human colonies had been placed on poisoned moons, under debt law. Whole battalions had been sold into proxy wars. Thousands of children had been moved through labor routes disguised as resettlement. And when humans complained, they were told to endure because their species was young, weak, and owed the civilized galaxy its life. Then 1 century they were simply gone. Their worlds went dark, their stations emptied, their fleets vanished beyond the rim. No one chased them because no one cared enough to learn where they went, until now. Captain Rel received new orders at dusk, shadowed the fleet from distance. Do not engage, do not provoke. He watched the silent armada move between stars with calm, terrifying purpose. Their ships were black, silver, and smooth, without visible weapons or flags. They traveled in exact formation, never wasting motion. Then a small object detached from the lead vessel and crossed the void toward the Ashura. Hold fire, Rel ordered. The object stopped just outside weapon range and sent a single transmission this time. It was not text, but a human face. The man looked older than Real expected. His hair was dark with lines of silver at the sides. His eyes were steady and full of cold patience. He wore a simple black uniform with no medals. I am Admiral Jonas Vall of the Return Fleet, he said. His voice was calm and plain. You are trespassing in Union territory? Rill answered. The human gave a small, sad smile that made the room colder. No, Captain. He said, we are crossing ground paid for with human blood. What do you want? Justice. Before Rel could answer, alarms screamed across the bridge. 3 Union attack frigates had dropped from jump behind the human ship and fired a full spread without waiting for orders. Bright lances of energy crossed the black and struck the empty space where the human vessel had been a blink earlier. The small craft vanished, not destroyed, gone. Then all 3 frigates stopped moving. Their power signatures fell to 0. One by one, their hulls split open without flame, without noise, as if invisible hands had opened them, and the broken ships drifted apart in dead silence. The human admiral reappeared on screen unharmed. Tell your leaders this. He said the debt will be collected only from those who built it. The innocent need not fear us unless they choose to stand beside the guilty. The transmission ended. Captain Rel stared at the drifting ruins and felt the first true crack in the old order of the galaxy. Humanity had come back, and this time it had returned stronger than fear itself. Panic did not spread in one great wave. It moved like poison through the stars, slow in some places, fast in others, but always certain. By the next cycle, every major system in the Union knew the same terrible words, and every market station, temple, port, military dock, and mining world had begun to whisper the same name. Humans had returned, and no one knew how to stop them. On the capital world, the news channels tried to speak with calm voices, but their eyes always betrayed. The map showed dark regions where contact had been lost, and new reports arrived every hour. Border forts vanished. Jump gates shut down. Convoys stopped answering calls. Sometimes there were wrecks, and sometimes there was nothing at all. The most frightening part was that the human fleet did not strike everywhere it chose. That made it worse. Whole sectors were ignored, while certain worlds, certain corporations, and certain noble houses suddenly found their communications cut and their defenses broken by systems no one could explain. Some planets woke to find human ships hanging above them in complete silence, while others saw nothing until their leaders were taken and their old archives opened to the public. Those archives told stories no government wanted remembered. Captain Rel was sent back to the capital to report in person because command trusted what he had seen. More than any recording, he walked through the council fortress under armed escort, even though he needed no guard. The halls were full of officials rushing in every direction, and the air felt like a storm trapped inside stone. He entered the strategy chamber, where the High Chancellor, military marshals, and sector ministers waited before he spoke. He noticed the old ambassador Thalik, sitting to one side, pale and tired like a man who had not slept since the message arrived. "Tell us what you saw," the Chancellor said. Rel spoke clearly and without drama because truth was enough. He described the fleet, the missing station, the human admiral, and the impossible destruction of the 3 frigates. No one interrupted him until he reached the end. Then Marshal Sarin struck the table with his metal hand. "This is terror warfare," he snapped. "They want us shaken before the real attack begins. What if this is the real attack?" Thalik asked. The Marshal glared at him. Humanity was a broken species. He said they had courage. Yes. Endurance. Yes, but not this. Not fleets beyond our sensors. Not weapons that peel warships open like fruit. "Someone is backing them," Rel answered, before he could stop himself. "Maybe no one backed them, because we gave them every reason to grow teeth." The Marshal did not like being challenged by a captain, but before he could speak, an officer hurried in with new data. A civilian transport had reached the capital after escaping the world of Sen Mara, one of the old debt-processing worlds that carried refugees, and one witness who had seen the humans on the ground. "Bring the witness," the Chancellor said. A small alien woman was led into the chamber. Her feathers were gray with age and smoke. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the cup of water given to her. She introduced herself as Lena of Sen Mara, once a clerk in a labor records ministry. "Tell us what happened," the Chancellor said gently. Lena closed her eyes for a moment and began. "They came before dawn," she said. "No bombardment, no warning. Our sky screens went dark, and then all defense towers shut down. Soldiers ran to their stations, but their weapons would not fire. People thought the end had come. Then the human ships descended." Her voice trembled harder. "They did not kill the crowds. They landed in the old government district and moved straight to the archive vaults. They knew every door, every tunnel, every hidden store of records, as if they had built the city themselves. Maybe they had, because humans did most of the labor when the district was raised." "What did they do with the archives?" Rel asked. "They opened them to the world," she whispered. "Every contract, every shipment, every debt sentence, every child list, every mine, death, every false resettlement order. All of it broadcast across public screens." The chamber felt colder by the second. "And the leaders of Sen Mara?" the Chancellor asked. "Gone," Lena said, taken alive. "I think the humans spoke to them in private. After that, the Governor Palace lights turned off, and by noon, white flags were hanging from every tower. Did the humans harm civilians?" Lena looked up. Then and there was confusion in her tired eyes. "No," she said. "That is why people are more afraid." They carried food packs into the lower districts. They opened water stations. They sent medics to old labor camps. One of them helped my grandson. When he fell in the street, he was kind. "Kind," the Marshal repeated with disgust. That word broke something in the room, because cruelty could be met with hate. But mercy, after long memory, was harder to face. While the leaders argued, fresh alerts struck the chamber screens. 4 more worlds had reported human arrivals. All 4 had one thing in common. Each had been central to the old debt system during the age of expansion: prison yards, conscription centers, war foundries, and forced settlement bureaus. "They are following the chain," Rel said quietly. "What chain?" asked the Chancellor. "The debt chain," he answered. "They are not hunting by borders. They are hunting by guilt." The room fell silent again, because everyone understood at once. For centuries, the Union had hidden its worst acts inside legal language and sealed records. But the humans had come back with names, dates, and evidence more complete than the Council's own databases. Somewhere in the dark, beyond the galaxy, they had remembered everything. Thalik rose with effort from his chair and leaned on his cane. "We are asking the wrong question," he said. "We keep asking how strong they are when we should ask how long they have prepared for this. If they left a century ago and return now with this kind of force, then every year of silence was a year of planning. Every now with this kind of force, then every dead child, every chain on every mine, moon was being counted." The Marshal sneered. "Fear is making poets of old men." Before Thalek could answer, another transmission arrived, this one from the world of Carthus and major shipyard and home of House Saran, one of the wealthiest bloodlines in the Union. The feed showed the shipyard orbit filled with human vessels motionless and vast below them. The world still turned peaceful blue and silver, with no sign of battle. Then the image shifted to the central plaza of the capital city. Thousands of civilians stood in silence watching a human officer on a raised platform. He was reading names from a screen behind him. Dates followed each name, and beside every date appeared a record of sentence, transfer, labor transport, or battlefield expendability order. When the camera zoomed in, some council members in the chamber went pale because the list included their ancestors. The human officer spoke in a simple, steady voice. These are the names of children sentenced under debt inheritance laws. These are the names of families broken for missed quotas. These are the names of battalions abandoned after fulfilling contract obligations. These are the names you buried. The broadcast ended, and the chamber exploded in argument. Some demanded immediate surrender talks. Others called for total mobilization. Still, others tried to deny the records, but the proof was too clear, and the worlds watching were already changing once hidden truth had become public. Truth and public truth could not be packed away again. Captain Rao left the chamber feeling no closer to peace than before. Outside the fortress balcony, he looked over the capital city where traffic lights moved like rivers between shining towers. People still walked the streets, but now they kept glancing upward as if they expected black ships to appear above the clouds at any moment. Thalek joined him after a while. "You believe they can be reasoned with," the old ambassador said. Rel took a moment before answering. "I believe they already are being reasonable. That may be the worst part." Thalek gave a tired nod. "Yes. If they wanted extinction, we would already have it." A young courier ran onto the balcony. "Breathless Captain Ambassador, you are needed at once. There has been contact from the human admiral." They hurried back inside. Admiral Jonas Vale appeared on the central screen again. His face calm as stone. Behind him stood a wall of stars and the dim outline of a bridge larger than any Union flagship. "Leaders of the Galactic Union," he said, "you may stop sending attack groups. They no longer serve a purpose. We are entering the inner routes. Now, worlds unmarked by dead operations will not be harmed unless they shield fugitives or resist investigation. Our quarrel is not with the innocent." The marshal pushed forward and shouted, "You call this justice?" While spreading terror across civilized space, Vale looked directly at him. "Terror was when you chained hunger to children and called it contract law." He said terror was sending human battalions into mine clouds to clear safe paths for your own fleets. Terror was making suffering administrative. No one answered. "We are not here to burn the galaxy," Vale continued. "We are here to end the system that fed on us and then erase the evidence. Stand aside and the guilty will face judgment. Stand against us and you will share their burden." The screen faded for a long moment. No one moved. Then outside, somewhere in the city, a public alarm began to sound, and another joined it, and another, until the whole capital seemed to cry out at once. The humans were coming closer, and fear was no longer rumor. It had become the new language of the stars. The first battle of the inner routes lasted less than 4 minutes. Later, the survivors would say it felt like much longer, because fear stretched time until each breath became a choice between hope and surrender. But the records were clear. 4 minutes from first contact to total collapse. The Union sent the 7th Defense Armada to block the human advance near the twin moons of Pelvira. The fleet was massive. 3 carriers, 12 line cruisers, 90 escort ships, and enough strike craft to darken local space. The Armada was commanded by Marshal Sarin himself, who had insisted on leading the operation to prove that discipline and superior numbers could still hold the galaxy together. Captain Rel watched the battle from the command deck of an observation vessel assigned by the Council to carry witnesses. He had protested that sending him so close again was foolish, but the Chancellor wanted clear eyes on whatever happened next. Rel suspected she also wanted at least one honest report in case the Marshal failed. Across the void, the human fleet arrived in perfect silence. There were fewer ships than the Union expected, maybe 1/3 of the Armada facing them, and for a brief, dangerous moment, confidence returned to the officers around Rel. Perhaps the humans had relied on fear and surprise. Perhaps they could bleed like anyone else. Marshal Saren's command came through all channels. Unidentified, hostile fleet. You will power down and submit to boarding or be destroyed by lawful military action. Admiral Vale answered only once. You were warned. Then the battle began. Union fighters rushed forward and bright clouds missiles lit the dark with fierce trails. Heavy cruisers opened fire and the space between fleets turned white from beam weapons and explosive shells. But the human ships moved in ways that looked wrong to the eye, not faster exactly, but cleaner, as if they ignored the hesitation built into every other machine they rotated through. Incoming fire, and left empty space where death expected solid metal. Then, something invisible passed across the armada. Rel felt it even through hull shielding, a low pressure in the bones. A silent shock that made every light on his deck flicker. On the tactical screen, half the Union formation went black, engines dead, weapons dark, navigation gone. The affected ships drifted helplessly into one another, and the remaining vessels tried to reform. But human craft had already entered the gaps, moving like blades through cloth. They struck power cores, sensor spines, and command towers, never wasting fire on random destruction. Every shot carried purpose. Every movement ended a threat. The carrier Valen's sun exploded when its own launch bays locked shut, with armed fighters still inside two destroyers, spun into collision after their guidance systems failed, and Marshal Saren's flagship lost all external communication. At the exact moment, a human cruiser appeared directly above it. Still, no planet was targeted. No civilian station burned. No retreating medical transport harmed. The humans fought like surgeons, cutting rot from living flesh. Rel heard officers on his bridge whispering prayers. After 4 minutes, the 7th Armada was finished. Some ships were destroyed, others crippled, and the rest had fled in broken directions, leaving the field to humanity. Marshal Saren's flagship remained intact, but powerless, trapped in the shadow of the human cruiser like prey under a hunter's hand. Then Admiral Vale transmitted on open channels to every world able to listen. "This is your proof," he said. "We do not seek conquest. We seek accountability. Those who organize the debt fleets, the labor laws, the hereditary penalties, the sealed transport camps, and the erasure courts will be taken. Those who stand aside will live. This is the final call for truth before judgment." For the first time in modern Union history, whole military districts refused further orders. Captains saw the battle feed and chose not to die for men whose crimes were spilling into public like garrisons. On 3 worlds opened their archive vaults without resistance. One prison moon sent a direct message to the human fleet, asking protection from its own overseers. The old order was starting to crack from within. On the capital world, the council no longer met in the grand public chamber. They had moved underground into secure war rooms beneath the fortress. Yet even there, safety felt thin, because human knowledge of buried history kept proving deeper than any shield. Captain Rel arrived for another emergency session and found the chamber divided into camps. One side wanted negotiation, one wanted evacuation to hidden core systems, and one still demanded full war no matter the cost. The High Chancellor looked older each time he saw her. "What do the humans actually intend once they have their guilty parties?" she asked the room. No one answered. Because no one knew, then a new presence entered unexpectedly. Admiral Jonas Vale stood in the room, not in person, but as a live projection so detailed it seemed he shared the floor with them. Guards raised weapons by instinct, until technicians confirmed he had breached no physical defenses. He had simply entered their systems, as if doors were suggestions. "You wanted clarification." Rael said so. "Listen well." The Chancellor steadied herself and faced him speak. Vale folded his hands behind his back. "Our records contain every debt convoy, every false treaty, every famine shipment withheld for compliance, every battlefield in which humans were placed first, because your planners believed we were harder to lose than your own sons and daughters." Marshal Saren's empty chair sat like a wound in the chamber. "We will remove from power all houses, boards, ministries, and military commands built on those acts." Vale continued. "Their records will be made public, their assets seized, their victims compensated where possible, their leaders judged according to the new accords already drafted." "New accords," the Chancellor repeated. "Yes," Vale said, "because after this, there will be no species debt inheritance, no labor bondage under survival terms, no sealed frontier courts, no expendable auxiliaries treated as lesser life. We are not here merely to punish the past. We are here to prevent its return. One minister spat back. You speak like rulers. Novale said, we speak like survivors who learned what rulers become when no one stops them. His calm was harder to face than rage would have been. Then Thalek rose from his seat and asked the question. None of the others dared if the guilty surrender and the system ends. Will you leave? Vale looked at the old ambassador for a long moment. Some of us will, he said. Some of us will remain to help rebuild what was broken. We did not cross the dark to become what hurt us, Ambassador. We came because no one else would end it. For the first time since the return message, the chamber held not only fear, but shame. Real watched the faces around him and saw old certainty dying, one expression at a time. The projection vanished, but its echo remained. Outside the council bunker, crowds had filled the streets, not rioting, not yet just waiting and watching. Giant public screens replayed human broadcasts beside newly released Union records. People read names and dates in silence. Workers saw the truth of their grandparents' disappearances. Soldiers learned why some frontier regiments had never come home. Whole districts discovered their prosperity had been built on hidden suffering, endured by a species once dismissed as useful. The turning point came from an unexpected place, the world of Iskara. A small trade system with no military value announced open alliance with the human return fleet. Its governor revealed that humans had once defended Iskara from pirate extermination, while the Union ignored its distress calls in gratitude. Generations of Iskarans had secretly preserved human testimonies and now released them all. Those testimonies spread like fire. They were simple accounts, a miner describing lung poison under quota law, a mother naming children taken for inherited debt, a soldier explaining how human shock troops were sent ahead to trigger enemy mines before Union armored units advanced. The stories were not dramatic. In the way leaders feared, they were worse, because they were plain. Rel read them late into the cycle and could not sleep afterward. By dawn, another crisis struck. Marshal Saren had been recovered alive when engineers restored partial power to his flagship. But instead of returning for debriefing, he fled toward the Saren Protectorate, one of the richest old house territories and a known center of erased debt records. He was running. That meant guilt had become public enough to frighten even the proud. The Chancellor ordered pursuit. But before Union ships could launch, a human message arrived. Saren is already accounted for. Do not waste fuel. Hours later, a new broadcast appeared across the galaxy. It showed Saren standing in a bare chamber stripped of rank marks and weapons. Beside him floated screens listing transport orders signed under his command decades earlier, battalions of human conscripts sent into plasma storms, and zero-chance assaults by the tens of thousands. Saren looked broken. The image did not show torture or force, only truth placed where all could see it. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. I signed them because it was lawful, he said, because victory required sacrifice, because they were available. Then another voice off-screen asked, did you ever sign your own blood for those same missions? Saren said nothing. The screen went black. People everywhere understood that silence. Captain Rel stood on a balcony again, staring at a capital that no longer trusted the foundation beneath. Ships were leaving in nervous streams, some carrying fugitives, others carrying families escaping possible war. But overhead the sky remained clear for now. Behind him, Thalek joined in silence. They are winning without destroying us. Rel said. Thalek nodded. Because destruction is easy. What they are doing is harder. They are forcing the galaxy to look at itself. Far above, the atmosphere sensor grids marked new arrivals at the edge of the core. Routes, more human ships, more silent shadows moving inward with patient certainty. The truth had broken into the open, and now every star had to choose whether to hide behind the past or face what humanity had come back to collect. Once panic reached the core worlds, it changed shape. At first, fear had meant invasion, burning skies, and shattered cities. But the human return fleet was not giving the galaxy that kind of enemy. Instead, it offered records, testimonies, lists, and names it exposed. The bones hidden under polished towers, and asked entire civilizations whether they wished to defend those bones or bury them properly at last. That question split worlds apart. On some planets, leaders surrendered within hours and opened every archive they owned. Human teams entered government halls, Not as looters, but as investigators. They sealed offices, copied files, released prisoners, and placed guards around hospitals, food depots, and schools to prevent chaos from turning into revenge. On other worlds, the ruling houses chose pride. House Saran was the strongest among them. Its fleets had once built half the Union Navy, and its wealth stretched across shipyards, mines, data vaults, and frontier trade routes for generations. The family had called itself a pillar of order. Now human broadcasts revealed it had also profited more than any other house from debt labor transport battalions and inherited service contracts signed by desperate human settlers. Yet House Saran still refused to surrender their capital. World Talvorn became the next center of the crisis. Captain Rel traveled there with a diplomatic convoy carrying the Chancellor's final offer: cooperate with investigation and retain limited local authority, or resist and face direct human action. Rel did not expect success, but duty sent him anyway. Talvorn was beautiful from orbit, wide oceans, silver clouds and golden city rings circling dark mountains. Wealth had made it elegant, and arrogance had made it blind. Human ships floated far beyond the defense grid, waiting like patient judges while Saran war platforms powered up around the planet. Inside the royal citadel, Lord Mayron Saran received the Union envoys with polished contempt. He was tall-dressed in white and gold, and so calm that Reel wanted to shake him. "You come trembling at ghosts," Lord Marin said after hearing the offer. Humans were labor stock that wandered away and learned tricks. Now they returned, demanding moral authority because a few old contracts appear unpleasant under modern taste. Unpleasant, repeated. Before he could stop himself, millions died under those contracts. Maron barely looked at him. "Empires are not built by softness, Captain." The Chancellor's envoy tried once more. "If you resist, there will be battle. Your shipyards are already contained." Manon smiled then, and it was the smile of a man who still believed money could change the laws of the universe. "Humanity cannot occupy every world," he said. "Sooner or later, fear will tire, and trade will return. When it does, history will remember who remained strong." Rel understood in that moment why the humans had come armed. Some men would never surrender to shame, because shame required seeing others as fully real, and Mayron Saran clearly did not. The talks failed. As the convoy returned to orbit, alarms rose across Talvorn. The human fleet had begun moving inward, not in attack formation, but in concentric rings around military assets. Defense satellites blinked out one at a time without visible strikes. Comm relays switched control to civilian emergency channels, and all war docks lost launch authority. House Saran responded with fury. They fired from the surface. 3 lances of planetary artillery leaped toward the nearest human cruiser. Rel expected a counterblow that would split the sky. Instead, the beams bent away in a field of strange blue distortion and vanished into upper atmosphere, where they burned harmlessly as falling light. Then, the human fleet answered, not with bombardment. Thousands of small pods fell through Talvorn's clouds and landed across military compounds, shipyards, data vaults, and noble estates. Each pod opened to release armored human teams, moving with impossible speed. They disabled weapons gates, power cores, and command centers, but avoided civilian districts with deliberate care. Rel watched the operation unfold on tactical display and felt awe replacing fear. These were not conquerors gone mad. These were professionals carrying out a list built long before arrival. The most surprising report came from the lower city. Human medics were treating local workers injured when Saran security forces opened fire on protest lines. "Protests?" Rel asked. "Yes, sir." The operator answered. "Huge crowds in the labor districts. Many are demanding the house surrender after the debt records were broadcast." That was when Rel realized Talvorn was already lost, not because of human power alone, but because truth had turned the people against their masters. He requested and received permission to land as observer under white flag. The shuttle brought him into a city trembling on the edge of history. Smoke rose from several government blocks, but the markets and housing sectors remained mostly intact. Civilians packed the streets, some angry, some terrified, many just stunned overhead. Human dropships crossed between towers in tight controlled lines. Rel expected hatred from the local crowd when they saw his uniform, but most barely noticed him. Their eyes were fixed on the giant public screens, now showing ledgers from House Saran vaults. There it was, In plain language, human child units reassigned to Orbit 17 for contract inheritance default, widowed settlers transferred to hazard clearance under emergency debt extension, frontline battalions designated expendable for shield depletion. Phase simple words, monstrous meaning. A voice beside Real said they wrote suffering like shipping numbers. He turned and saw a young Talvorn woman with soot on her face and a factory badge on her coat. She was staring at the screen with wet, furious eyes. "Did you know any of this?" he asked. "Not all of it," she said, "but enough we were told the lower districts were poor because they lacked discipline. Now we learn our food and towers and schools were paid for by ghosts." Before Rel could answer, the crowd parted as a column of human soldiers entered the square. They were taller than most species in their dark armor, but they did not aim weapons at civilians. One of them removed his helmet and stepped onto a transit bench so all could see his face. "We are securing the ministry quarter," he called the voice translator, carrying his simple English into local speech. "Stay clear of marked zones. Medical aid is available at the East Fountains and Central Rail Station. No civilian will be harmed unless armed resistance begins." Someone in the crowd shouted, "Why should we trust you?" The human looked at the screens around them. "Because you can read what they did, and because we have not fired on your homes." That answer spread through the square like a strange, fragile calm. Rel moved with the crowd toward the ministry quarter where smoke and sirens filled the air. On the way he saw things he would never forget. Human engineers, reconnecting water lines cut by retreating Sauron forces, a human officer carrying an injured alien child through falling ash and handing her to medics, a group of local workers standing between a human squad and a mob to prevent prisoners from being beaten to death. Before trial, justice was trying to happen in real time, and everyone involved seemed afraid of breaking it near sunset. Real reached the steps of the Central Archive Hall. There he saw Admiral Jonas Vale in person for the first time. The human leader stood without helmet under a rain of drifting sparks from damaged drones. Around him moved guards and data teams, but he seemed almost alone in his stillness. Real approached slowly and announced himself. "Captain Rel Thorin, Union Observer." Vale studied him with the same steady eyes from the screen. "I remember you." He said you listened before speaking at the border. Rel hesitated, then asked the question growing in him since Pelverdaverwhy. "Spare these worlds. Why not simply destroy the guilty strongholds and be done?" Vale looked past him toward the city where crowds now filled the avenues under giant screens. "Because," he said, "if we burn everything, then the old lies survive in the ashes. They will say monsters came from the dark, and civilization fell bravely against them. No, we need witnesses. We need records open. We need children on every world to know exactly what was done, and by whom." A distant blast shook the air from the upper Citadel house. "Saren's last loyal guards," Val said without turning. "They are collapsing," and after that, Real asked. "After that, trials, reparations, dismantling of debt structures, and systems of oversight from all major species, we build something better, or this happens again in another form." Rel looked at him closely. "Then you still believe something better is possible after what was done to your people?" For the first time, Vale showed emotion, not anger exactly, but old pain, sharpened into choice. "We did not come back because we trust the galaxy, Captain. He said we came back because we refused to leave it in the hands that shaped it before." Night fell over Talvorn. By midnight, Lord Marin Saren was captured alive trying to escape through a private launch tunnel with encrypted ledgers and family relics. He did not die on a battlefield as he had imagined. He was arrested in darkness by the descendants of people. His house once counted as usable losses. When the news spread through the city, many expected the humans to celebrate. They did not. They posted curfew routes, opened more aid stations, and prepared the first public hearing. Captain Rel stood in the square among workers, soldiers, clerks, and children as the great screens changed from ledgers to a single line. "Justice begins at dawn." No cheers, followed only silence. The kind of silence that comes when an age of lies finally cracks, and all who lived inside it must decide what they will become once the truth gets in. Justice at dawn did not look like anyone expected. There were no chains dragged through the streets, no public executions, no cruel victory marches. The first hearing on Talvorn took place in the old Commerce Hall, where Hal Saran had once sold mining rights and military contracts. Now the polished chamber had been stripped of banners and lined with witness tables, translators, and record screens. Every seat was filled. workers from the lower districts, union officials, neutral observers, human officers, and families holding old photographs of the dead. Captain Rel attended as military observer, but after everything he had seen, the title felt empty. He was there because history was happening and because he no longer trusted others to describe it honestly. Lord Marin Saran was brought in under guard, still dressed in noble white, though the gold trim had been removed. He tried to look proud, but pride had become hard to maintain under the weight of thousands of public eyes. Admiral Jonas Valle did not act as judge instead. The hearing was led by a mixed tribunal. Humans, aliens, legal scholars, survivors, and one seat left empty in symbol for those who never lived to speak their own names. The charges began: forced debt inheritance, illegal labor transfer, wartime expendability doctrine, record erasure, conspiracy resource hoarding during famine compliance cycles, child separation under contract enforcement. Each charge brought documents, witness accounts, transport data, and signed orders onto the giant screens. None of it could be denied because House Saran's own vaults had preserved too much, and human intelligence had preserved the rest across generations of exile. Marin tried anyway. The laws were valid at the time, he said coldly. The galaxy was unstable. Harsh measures sustained civilization. A murmur of disgust rolled across the chamber. Then a human woman stepped forward to testify. She was older, with scar tissue along one side of her neck and simple civilian clothes. The tribunal introduced her as Mara Vale, descendant of Labor Convoy 7 and relative of Admiral Jonas Valle. Captain Rel glanced toward the admiral, but the man did not move. Mara spoke in soft, clear words. My great-grandmother was born under contract because her parents borrowed food during a dust blight. She worked in an ore pit at 9 years old and lost 2 brothers before she turned 12. One died of lung rot. One disappeared after missing quota by 3 units when the mine collapsed. The company filed both deaths as asset expiration and charged burial costs to the family debt line. The hall became so still that every breath sounded loud. Mara looked directly at Marin Saran and continued. Your records say her line was productive. Then she stepped back. That one sentence struck harder than any shout. Witness followed. Witness: not all human. Some were aliens from border worlds who had seen the system up close and once convinced themselves it was unfortunate, but necessary now. With the ledgers open, they no longer had that excuse. One former union accountant confessed to hiding casualty ratios by changing the species column on death reports. A retired officer admitted that human battalions were often selected first for breach assaults because Central Command believed public reaction would be smaller if they died. Through all of it, Vale remained quiet. The hearing lasted until dusk, and when it ended, Marin Saran was remanded for sentencing. After broader sector investigations concluded no blood was spilled, but every world watching understood something final had happened. A great house had not merely fallen, it had been stripped of the story it told about itself. That should have broken the resistance. Instead, it cornered it. By the next cycle, several noble blocks and hardline military remnants formed what they called the Preservation Front. They declared the hearings illegitimate and accused the humans of dismantling civilization through emotional manipulation. Their broadcasts promised to restore order and defend lawful heritage against revenge politics. Captain Rel read the manifesto and felt sick because the language was familiar. Every old abuse hid behind words like order, heritage, necessity. The front made its stand at Karen Gate, the largest fortress nexus between the core and the wealthy inner colonies. If they held it, they could protect fugitives from the tribunal and maybe force the galaxy into a long civil war. The human fleet moved at once. This time, the Union did not fully oppose them. Half its surviving commanders refused front orders, and several even offered route data to avoid civilian casualties. The old system was tearing itself apart exactly as Vale had predicted. Rel was assigned to a joint coordination ship sent to monitor evacuation lanes around Chiron Gate. He watched as tens of thousands of civilians fled the fortress stations, while Preservation Front battleships locked into defensive rings around the gate itself. War was coming, and everyone knew it. Admiral Vale sent one final message to the front. Surrender the fugitives, open the records, release indentured populations, and stand down your guns. This is your last chance to separate survival from guilt. The reply came from a masked front speaker. Humanity seeks not justice, but supremacy. We will not kneel to the descendants of labor stock. The probably banned moments later, Caron Gate was not like Pelvar. It was heavier, uglier. Desperate, the front had packed the zone with minefields, interceptor drones, and old dreadnoughts built during the debt wars they fought, not to win but to prevent judgment, and such enemies were always dangerous. Human ships entered the field in layered formations, their silent precision meeting the front's raw fury. Head-on mines went dark before detonation. Drone clouds folded in on themselves as command loops were hijacked. A dreadnought broke apart when its spinal cannon overloaded under its own forced charge. But the front still hit hard. Several human escorts were crippled, and one shattered completely against the gate shield ring. Rel felt each loss like a distant wound, though he had never expected to mourn human warships. The most terrible moment came when the front tried to use civilians as cover. They pulled refugee carriers from holding lanes and pushed them toward the battle zone, hoping human fire would stop. It did stop. For 8 dangerous minutes, the human advance paused while smaller crafts surged forward to tow the carriers clear under direct enemy fire. Rel watched in stunned silence as human pilots placed themselves between civilian hulls and incoming missiles. Some died doing it. That ended any remaining illusion about who the monsters were. Once the civilians were safe, Vale changed tactic. Human cruisers struck the shield generators in sequence, then targeted command nodes rather than whole mass. The front fleet began to unravel ship by ship. Pockets of loyalists fought on, but many crews surrendered the moment their officers lost control. Inside the fortress itself, ground teams raced through corridors to reach the fugitive vaults, where high ministers, old house heirs, and military planners had hidden with encrypted records and transport wealth. Rel joined the entry team as liaison, mostly because no one thought to stop him anymore. The halls of Caron Gate were full of smoke, broken lights, and the smell of burning insulation. He followed human marines through armored doors blasted open with clean, terrifying speed. In the deepest chamber, they found the heart of the old system vaults, stacked with sealed archive cores, wealth bars, contract tablets, and lineage records proving how many ruling houses had carried species debt across generations while publicly denying it. And there, among the fugitives, was Marshal Siren again, escaped from prior detention through loyalist sabotage, now cornered once more. He looked at Rel before the humans took him, perhaps because Rel was the only familiar face in the room. You think they bring justice? Saren rasped. They bring an end to our kind of power. Rel answered quietly. Maybe that is justice. Saren laughed once, bitter and empty, then lowered his head as human guards bound his hands. By the time Caron Gate fell, the preservation front was finished. Scattered bands remained, but the center was broken. Fugitives were in custody. The vaults were secured, and the gate itself passed to joint civilian control. All across the galaxy, people watched the results come in and understood the same thing. The last great defense of the debt order had failed, not because humans were stronger in every number, but because the old rulers had mistaken fear for loyalty and law for morality. That night, Captain Rel stood on the observation deck of the coordination ship, watching wreckage drift beyond. The glass stars burned cold behind it, and rescue craft moved among the remains, searching for any survivor from either side. Admiral Vale joined him. After a while, it is almost over. Rel said, the war. Yes, Vale answered. The harder part begins now. Rebuilding. Remembering correctly, Vale said, because if memory bends the wrong way, men like Saren return under cleaner names. Rel looked at the human leader and asked what happens to the empire that made all this possible. Vale watched the stars before speaking. Tomorrow, they will choose accept responsibility and enter the Accords, or force one final reckoning. Rel thought of all the worlds, all the names, all the generations that had lived and died under the word debt, and in the silence between stars, he knew the galaxy was standing at its last old doorway. One step remained, either toward truth or back into darkness. The final decision was made on the world of Orion. For centuries, Orion had been the ceremonial heart of the Union. Though power and practice moved through noble blocks, trade combines, and military councils, this world still carried the old symbols. Its white domes, high courts, memory gardens, and senate rings had long presented the image of a noble civilization. Now humanity had forced that civilization to stand beneath its own image and ask whether anything honest remained inside it. After the fall of Caron Gate, delegations from every major species were summoned to Orion, not by threat alone but by necessity. The old system had collapsed too far to be hidden again. Fleets were broken, archives exposed, nobles captured, and the people on 1,000 worlds were demanding a new order before chaos filled the space left behind. Captain Rel arrived with a Union delegation and walked through streets crowded with citizens holding screens, tablets, and banners. Some demanded punishment, some begged for peace. Many simply carried the names of dead relatives newly found in released records. Orion had never looked like this. Before, its calm had always been polished. Now it looked real. Above the world, the human return fleet formed a vast ring beyond defense range, visible from the surface at night like dark stars that moved with purpose. The sight frightened many, but also reminded everyone why they were gathered. The humans had the power to force an ending by war, yet they had chosen this final chance through law. The assembly met in the Hall of Founding, where the old Union Charter had once been signed. The great chamber held humans and aliens together, now under watch from mixed peace guards. The empty symbol chair for the dead still stood at the center. High Chancellor Esvon opened the session with no ornament. "We are here because truth has overtaken power," she said. The debt system in all its forms stands exposed. The question before us is no longer whether crimes occurred, but whether we accept responsibility and bind ourselves to an order where such crimes cannot hide again. Then she yielded the floor to Admiral Jonas Fall. He walked to the center without uniform decorations or ceremonial blade, only a dark plain coat and the weight of generations behind his eyes. "We did not return for apology alone," he said. "We returned because apology without structure is air we present." The Restoration Accord, species dead inheritance, abolished frontier labor tribunals, dissolved all sealed war records, opened mixed oversight councils established on every major trade route and industrial zone, reparations funded from confiscated holdings of the guilty, and civilian protections enforced across species without hierarchy. Screens rose around the hall showing each article in simple language. No grand phrases, no loopholes. "If you sign," Vale continued, "this war ends. If you refuse, then know clearly what refusal means. You choose to preserve the system that made us and others expendable, and we will dismantle that choice with force until nothing of it remains." The hall buzzed with tense whispers. Then came the moment everyone had feared. The representative of the remaining hardline bloc rose, Lord Terranval, last voice of the old Imperial caucus. He was not as openly arrogant as Marin Saren, or as brutal in bearing as Saren, but his smooth face hid the same belief in inherited order. "Civilization cannot survive governed by grievance," he said. "The galaxy is built on unequal burdens, always has been, always will be. If we accept these accords, we invite endless accusation, endless weakness, rule by memory instead of strength." Some delegates nodded, though not many. Captain Rel felt old anger rise. But before he could speak, the reply came from a place no one expected. An elderly woman from the visitors' tier stood without permission. Security moved toward her until the Chancellor signaled them back. The woman introduced herself as Sarah Dorn, former records clerk from the agricultural moon Hess. She was not human. She was not noble. She had no rank at all. "My husband vanished in a transport audit 40 years ago," she said. "I was told he had fled his duties after the records opened. I learned he was reassigned under debt balance law to a toxic reclamation field, where he died in 7 days. Our children grew up believing he abandoned them." Her voice shook, but did not break. "You call this grievance, Lord Vol? I call it fact, and I am tired of powerful men speaking as if truth is a disease." The hall burst into sudden applause. Not planned, not polite, real applause. The kind born from people hearing their own silenced lives, spoken plainly at last. After that, the resistance in the room began to fail. Delegates rose one by one to support the accords, some from guilt, some from fear, some from true conviction. The small worlds moved first because they had suffered under the same structures in different forms, then border systems, then neutral trade blocs, then whole union sectors whose commanders already knew the old order could not be restored without endless blood. Finally, the Chancellor signed one by one. Others followed. The Restoration Accords became law before sunset. Lord Vol and the last holdouts refused and walked out of the hall under guard. They had chosen irrelevance over surrender. Humanity allowed them to live, but stripped them of authority pending tribunal review. In another age, they would have fled to hidden fortresses. This age had no safe dark left. That night, the skies of Oregon filled with light, not from battle, but from ships of many species, broadcasting the signed articles to every world. Children read them in school. Squares. Workers listened in factory yards. Prisoners heard them in camps. Now, ordered, opened, and families gathered around public screens, waiting for names, records, and answers. Captain Rel spent the night in the memory gardens, where stone pillars carried names of Union heroes from past wars. Now new pillars were being prepared for names long excluded, the dead of debt fleets, labor moons, famine contracts, and erased settlements. He walked until moonrise and found Admiral Vale standing beside a pool, reflecting both the garden lights and the distant human fleet overhead. "It is done, Rel," said. "The accords are signed." Vale answered yes. "You do not sound relieved." Vale was quiet for a moment. "Victory can become another lie if it turns into self-worship." He said. "We ended a system we did not heal. Every wound. Not tonight. Maybe not in our lifetime." Rel looked at the water, then asked the question that had lived in everyone for days. "Will humans remain? Some will." Vale said. "Investigators, builders, teachers, peace officers, witnesses. Some will go home. What home means now is complicated." "And you?" Vale gave a small, tired smile. "I have been away from Earth longer than I ever lived on it. Perhaps I stay until the first generation born under these accords is old enough to distrust easy power on its own." Rel laughed softly. At that, the sound surprising both of them. By the next week, human ships had begun to withdraw from several sectors, not in retreat, but in measured redistribution. Local mixed councils took control of archives and aid programs. Prisoner camps, resettlement centers, seized wealth, funded medical and food relief on worlds once squeezed by debt. Law trials continued, but not as spectacles. Evidence came first, process second, punishment last, exactly the order the old rulers had so often reversed. There were still dangers: smugglers, black market militias, bitter loyalists, and frightened populations who did not know whether to trust the new structure. But the galaxy had moved from terror into the harder work of change. Months later, Captain Rel visited the former border region where this new age had begun. Varus Station was gone forever, but in its place, workers from 6 species were building a new memorial port. Part transit hub, part archive, part school. At its entrance would stand the first public inscription of the return message: "We have returned. We have come to collect their debt." Beneath it, another line had been added: "By common vote. The debt was truth, and it was paid with truth." Rel stood there on the half-finished platform while distant engines hummed, and children from nearby colonies asked guides about humans, as if speaking of both history and future. At once, none of them spoke the old footnote version anymore. None of them believed humanity had been a minor race that vanished into darkness. They knew better. Humanity had gone into darkness because the galaxy pushed it there, and it had come back, carrying memory like a blade and justice like a burden it refused to drop. That evening, as the sun of the sector sank red behind scaffolds, a final public message from Admiral Vale was broadcast across rebuilt channels. "We never forgot," he said, "but memory alone is not enough. Choose what you become after truth, and that choice will decide whether this peace lives longer than the last one." Then the signal ended, and one section of the human fleet turned toward deep space, its light shrinking slowly among the stars. People watched in silence, not the silence of fear this time, the silence of respect, awe, and the uneasy hope that maybe, after everything, the galaxy had one real chance to become better than what it had been. And in that silence, the long dead of the stars was finally closed.